So, on the recommendation of a friend, I've decided to check out the new He-Man show, or, Masters of the Universe Revelations. Notice the lack of He-Man in the title. I know almost nothing about He-Man. In fact, what little I do know is from old Robot Chicken sketches and Flash Gits cartoons. So I'm just coming at this from the angle of, maybe this will be so bad it's good, or maybe I'll be surprisingly entertained, I don't know. But I have no personal investment in He-Man. The cartoon is way before my time. Those are the real boomers that grew up and watched that show. The closest thing I've enjoyed to it is the 2011 Thundercats cartoon, which obviously is not exactly the same thing, but I did enjoy that. And so how good could a modern reboot of an 80s cartoon made to sell action figures possibly be? Well, it's even worse than you imagine. Despite being only 5 episodes, it manages to completely trash everything that people liked about He-Man, as you'll see soon enough. And you can thank Kevin Smith, who has admitted before that he doesn't even like He-Man. And so who better to run the new show than someone who likely hates everything that this show stands for, and no doubt wants to emasculate young children because of the haunting idea of toxic masculinity. But before we get into this, do the things the algorithm likes. It really helps out the channel. For some reason, according to YouTube analytics, reminding people makes them do the thing. And check out my Patreon if you want to support me directly. And without further ado, let's emasculate another male-dominated franchise. So this thing is only 5 episodes long, as I just said before, so we might as well just go through the whole thing. I doubt any of you really care about this anyway, so of course, major spoilers from here on out. If for some reason you care about that, well, the show sucks anyway, and it's not that long, so whatever, watch it if you want to hurt yourself. And I'll admit the first episode is actually pretty passable. This is the one that Kevin Smith wrote himself, so maybe the series would have actually been slightly better if he had written the entire thing. So the show starts off by luring you into a false sense of security with this high-quality Conan-esque art style, and it looks really good. Sadly, we never see it again, so it's ultimately pointless. We meet Teela, the daughter of Duncan, aka Man-at-Arms, who I'm sure is a well-known character from the cartoon. And Teela is looking like a certain professional golfer that we all know and love. And the king and queen are throwing this huge party as Teela is going to take over for Duncan's old position and be the new Man-at-Arms. Meanwhile, there's this huge battle going on around Castle Grayskull as Skeletor tricks the sorceress by both disguising himself and one of his minions as He-Man. And so together they assault the castle, and the sorceress has to protect herself in this magic field thing, and there's a whole bunch of action shit going on, and it's somewhat entertaining. I'll say that the action is passable in this series. It commits the sin that a lot of cartoons commit, where they cut away from big impacts. I don't know if it's for censorship reasons, to just keep whatever TV rating it's supposed to have down, but considering this is a Netflix series made for Reddit man children, let's not doubt that for a second, this is not actually made for kids. It's very strange that they decide to pull that same sin and just cut away from the action. Maybe they just didn't want to animate the cool impacts, I don't fucking know, but it is distracting. So back at the party, Adam, aka the Prince, aka He-Man, finds out the sorceress is in trouble, and so the heroes ride off to go save her, and there's this big showdown. And it's important to note here that Skeletor does not have his typical super high-pitched, kind of whiny, cartoonish voice. The whole, "Yeah, He-Man." No, instead, it's Mark Hamill just doing his Joker voice.
But my repeated failures were but a bridge to my success, sorceress.
Which is very strange to me, because Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy both agreed they weren't gonna do, essentially, you know, Batman the Joker anymore. But now Mark Hamill's literally just doing Joker for Skeletor. So yeah, that was pretty distracting. Then we get our first edgy moment as Moss Man appears and ties up Skeletor in his vines, but Skeletor uses his flame staff to basically kill Moss Man. So if there was any doubts about whether or not this was supposed to be like a a little kid's show to sell more action figures. No, it's not. It's one of those modern shows that can't decide whether it wants to be for children or for adults. And instead of going this sort of like Steven Universe route of appealing to adult women children, it's instead for the average Reddit man-child. And so the show sort of balances between having really terrible pun-based humor and then also murdering random characters for no reason. So out of rage, He-Man actually stabs Skeletor, which opens up this big pyramid thing, which has this orb in it that apparently the orb has like all the magic in the universe and holds the universe together. And it's literally just been sitting here in Castle Grayskull in their basement the entire time with like no protection other than He-Man, I guess. And so with the orb opened up, Skeletor smashes the orb and He-Man has to contain the huge magical explosion that'll destroy the universe with his Sword of Power. And this splits the Sword of Power in half, and both Skeletor and He-Man are disintegrated. And that's it. That's the whole show. Yeah, it's pretty short. You know, it was kind of okay. It wasn't as bad as I thought. Yeah, no. There's 4 more episodes of this. So, if you've been paying attention, I think you know where this is going. Teela is the main character. That's why it doesn't have He-Man in the title. And so, what ends up happening is Duncan reveals to the king and queen that Adam was He-Man all along. And so, the king exiles Duncan. Teela feels betrayed because she was lied to, since pretty much all of He-Man's friends, except Teela, knew his secret identity. And so she's pretty much pissy about this for like the entire rest of the show. And it's fucking terrible, man. She's just absolutely insufferable, as you'll see in the next episode. And so there you go, there's the first episode. This is actually the best episode of the 5. It's only downhill from here, guys. So in episode 2, some unspecified amount of time later, Teela's now looking like a proper ma'am.
Excuse me, it's ma'am. It is ma'am.
Having now ditched what little femininity she had before, and essentially she's now doing mercenary work and has found a new partner, Andra, and she is just the token black girl. She has basically no personality whatsoever other than the fact that she is an engineer. Because I guess giving her a personality would be racist or something. So she just kind of exists and is excited about machine things. So basically this old woman gives him a task to find this magic goblet or whatever that's in like this machine god cult. Teela and Andra have to defeat this cyborg guy whose name I can't remember. I think they said it like one time. And basically his machine cult has you drink this magic robot liquid which turns you into a cyborg. But it's not magic though, it's just technology. All those like laser beams and shit that come out of crystals, not magic apparently. Because there's no magic left, more or less, except for a very, very small amount. And Eternia is slowly dying, because it needs magic. And if Eternia dies, the whole universe dies. So they get the goblet after some more stupid action bullshit, where Teela shows off how much of a strong, independent woman she is and beats up a bunch of men and shit. It's great. They get the goblet, then they gotta go back to Castle Grayskull. And it turns out the old lady was actually Evil Lynn, Skeletor's second-hand woman. And she's very jaded this entire show. And this is sort of a bit of a side tangent, but she's voiced by Lena Headey, however you say her last name, who played Cersei Lannister in Game of Thrones, and obviously it seems like she has no vocal range, because she's basically just playing Cersei Lannister again.
I too was intrigued by dangerous men when I was just an idiot girl like you.
And so basically, the evil sorceress has to team up with the good guys to save the sorceress and save all the magic, otherwise the universe dies, as I said. But of course, Teela, the fucking is gonna let the entire universe die because Adam lied to her about being He-Man. Are you fucking kidding me? It takes Cringer, the fucking green tiger, to be like, hey, don't let the universe die. And she's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Fuck this show, dude. This isn't even the last time this happens. And so that's pretty much the end of the second episode. In episode 3, we start off with a flashback to where He-Man and Teela fight the Merman and his mermen. I forget what they're actually called, but I'm just gonna call them that. And, you know, Skeletor's there, and they almost drown, but then Duncan comes and saves the day, right? So, this episode, they have to go to find Duncan. Tila is Duncan's adopted daughter, but apparently he wasn't a really good father or something, but they never actually show it at all. They just hint toward it because there's no time, because there's only 5 episodes, so we gotta rush this shit along. And basically, they save some village from that cyborg guy again. And apparently Beastman shows up, and Beastman is loyal to Evil Lyn for whatever reason, it's not explained. And so they go back to Duncan's hut, and Duncan doesn't want to help. And so instead, Roboto, apparently he's a robot, but his robot brain is based on Duncan's brain, so he can reforge the Sword of Power and save everything or whatever. But then Duncan decides he wants to come anyway, but then Tila says don't come, so he doesn't come. And they go off to go to hell, because apparently the two halves of the sword are in heaven and hell. I believe it's Subterranea and Preternia, or something like that. And so the flashback in the beginning of the episode serves a purpose, because on the way, their boat is attacked by Merman, who has scars all over his body, and is super cool and edgy, bro. And he starts kicking the hero's ass, but then Duncan shows up, again, just like the flashback. And he basically single-handedly beats up all of the Mer people, and the heroes just stand by and watch. And so instead of killing Merman, Merman uses his water powers that he could have just fucking used to capsize the boat instead of jumping on and fighting them. He like creates some tidal wave thing that carries the heroes to their destination. I mean, really? Yeah, you're only gonna use this now. Okay, whatever, fine. Then Duncan decides he's gonna leave now. Even though we probably need you in hell because it's gonna be way more dangerous than this. Nah, fuck it, go home, Duncan. Nobody cares. And so it just so happens that Skeletor's goat skull thing on his staff opens the door to hell, and so the heroes go to hell, but Evil Lyn takes the skull with her, so the passage closes behind them. And that's the end of the episode. Then we get to episode 4, and episode 4 is a complete waste of time. I know you've seen this setup before, but it happens a bunch in kids' movies, or a bunch of cartoons sometimes have this, but it's a Face Your Inner Fears episode. And that's basically all they do the entire episode. Now, I neglected to mention that last episode, they picked up Orko, who's this little black mage dude. I guess he's from another dimension or something. And basically, he's a sad sack the entire time because he's sick, because there's no magic in the world, and he's a magician, but he's also a failure of a magician who can't really control his magic. It honestly wasn't really relevant to the plot at all until this episode. And so the gang is split into 3 groups, because again, it would take too much time to give everyone their own individual inner demons, and that would actually have character development for some of these characters, so we don't have time for that shit. So instead, Andra, Roboto, and Beastman are trapped in like some endless undead nightmare thing. None of them are said to be scared of zombies, by the way, so again, this is just like a lazy fear bait type of nightmare that doesn't even make sense from a character perspective. Meanwhile, Evil Lyn and Orko are shown Orko's like home dimension, I guess, and everyone's gone there, which the show implies is both one of Orko's fears and also a possible future if all the magic's gone, or possibly right now, all of them could be dead. Is this expanded upon later? No, not at all. But I will give this scene credit that at least it plays off the character's fears. Both characters are sort of afraid of being incompetent or lesser. Evil Lyn less so, obviously. And also, I find it hilarious they reveal the origin of her name is she called herself Evil. I mean, again, it's just a tonal whiplash. If that was in the original 80s cartoon, that would fit fine. But in a show where we're expected to take this seriously, that just sounds idiotic. Now you'll notice that Orko gets a strange amount of screen time in this episode. I wonder if that's hinting towards something. Maybe a death flag of sorts. Especially since he tells his backstory. So while these 2 nightmares are going on, Tila's nightmare might just be the dumbest fucking thing in this show, and honestly is where it actually crossed over into being stupid feminist drivel. Because honestly, up to this point, I could stand some of it. It's like, whatever, she's a strong woman, at least she looks muscular, so it's a lot more believable. She actually makes Adam look like a twink, which is kind of embarrassing in the next episode, as you'll see. But Tila meets, I guess, like the Lord of Hell or something, and he looks a lot like Skeletor, but he says he's not really Skeletor, and that's never explained either. But basically, he just wants her fear in exchange for the sword, and so she has her own nightmare where she has to fight evil He-Man. And so you think, oh, I get it, she's afraid of being incompetent or like second rate to him, or just not acknowledged for her accomplishments maybe. Nope, it's none of those things. You'll never guess what she's afraid of. She's afraid of being too special. You think I'm making this fucking shit up? I am not making this up. She's afraid of being exceptional. Are you fucking kidding me? God, fuck me, dude. If we weren't living in Clown World, this would be an obvious parody line, because the moment any character says something like this, it is no longer up for debate whether or not they are a Mary Sue. It is incredibly clear that Tila is a Mary Sue, and why should you care about anything that's happening at this point? A show about He-Man, or at least it was supposed to be, makes Tila out to be the perfect, flawless female character. This is just embarrassing at this point. Again, it's just emasculation of yet another beloved franchise that men enjoy, because apparently women just have to shove into every male hobby imaginable. And honestly, I don't even think women chose this in this case, except for the evil feminist bitches, whatever, they don't count. But the average woman does not care about He-Man at all, so this doesn't make any fucking sense. So whatever, who cares anymore? And so she has her like heroic aura and defeats Skeletor, Satan. Guess how they get to heaven? You would think, oh, okay, now we have to go on this mighty trek, maybe climb Mount Olympus, maybe meet some new characters, face some other tribulations to get there. Nope. The evil sword opens the portal to heaven. Why? Who fucking knows? Who cares? And before they can escape, Super Skeletor ties them up in evil vines and is about to kill them, and then Orko unleashes his limit break, uses all his magical power to hold back the evilness, and then he fucking dies. Orko's dead. And so they go to heaven, He-Man's there, and that's the end of the episode. And now we have the final episode, and we gotta wrap things up, so not a whole lot happens, but a lot happens at the same time. Basically, He-Man has no idea what's happened on Eternia and that everything's dying, and Tila's still being a bitch and won't tell him anything. And so we get to meet all the other previous He-Men before him, and we learn that Adam, I guess because he's just a cuck, maybe he has a cuck fetish, I don't know. He chose to be in his wimpy form, where every other hero has chosen to be in their He-Man form. Is this ever explained? No. And it looks like Tila's about to get blacked by He-Man #1 over here, while he just watches and jerks off, but, you know, maybe that would be a little bit too rated R for this show. Meanwhile, Roboto has to reforge the sword, because He-Man just gives him the sword, because why not, I guess. And so there's actually probably one of the only cool scenes in the show is Roboto reforging the sword. It looks cool, but there's a huge explosion and he ends up dying. The problem with this and the Orko death is that if you don't care about the original show, there's not nearly enough time to be invested in these characters to care about these deaths, so it just falls flat. And so, meanwhile, I'm not even going to go through it, but basically, He-Man tries to patch it up with Tila, and it kind of works, sort of, whatever. Apparently, anybody in Preternia can just go back to Eternia and be alive again. The only consequence is that you won't be able to go back to Elysium, essentially, right? You'll essentially just die and become one with the soil or the grass or whatever Mossman said. And so He-Man decides he's going to go anyway, and so they go back to the mortal world. They go to Castle Grayskull. They try to get all the magic back, and then it turns out Skeletor's essence was inside Evelyn's staff the entire time. And so Skeletor stabs He-Man with his spear, and as he's like bleeding out, Skeletor gets the Sword of Power. Nobody stops him. Nobody does anything but just watch it happen. And then he summons the power of He-Man and becomes like a god, and that's the end. Because the show's going to be in multiple parts, apparently. And yeah, the show sucks. Is anybody gonna watch part 2? Maybe if this video does well, I'll watch it for you and talk about it. Why not? It's kind of entertaining to shit on something, especially if it's not a video game for once. But honestly, there's not really enough here to even hate watch the show. Most of the time I was just bored. Maybe I've just gotten desensitized to feminist type shit, you know? So it doesn't really bother me that much anymore unless it's really blatant. Honestly, in this case, it was just kind of typical strong woman character who's kind of a bitch. It wasn't really egregious. She didn't say she hated all men or something. Evil Lynn kinda said it, but she's evil, so who cares? The only thing that's hilarious to me is that Andra is a new character and she adds absolutely nothing to the show. I mean, I'm not even making a controversial statement here. She really just doesn't do anything. So it looks like a token diversity pick, but it's not really offensive, at least not to me, because she's just a background character. They pretend that she's not, but she is. And so yeah, there's really no reason to watch this whatsoever. And there's gonna be no reason to watch the next part. But I hope you were entertained by this at least. Do the things the algorithm likes, if you haven't already. I'm definitely still doing the Deus Ex review. I just have been putting it off for whatever reason. I don't know, I got caught up in playing New Vegas mods, and so I've been wasting a lot of time doing that. But I'm still gonna do Deus Ex, and then after that, I don't know. I'm not gonna make any promises because I have a very fickle mind. That's about it. I'll see you next time, guys.